Rabbi, we're carrying on Yerushalmi Peah, and we're doing the Chazarah, a quick revision. So we're starting from page 20b, okay, which talks about things which make a division as far as seeds are concerned, and things you need a fence as far as making a division with a tree field. But we said if you have interlocking branches, it doesn't mafsik, it doesn't break the fields up, and you can give one lot of Peah. With carobs, we said, look, if the carob trees can see each other, you give one lot of Peah. Rabbi Gamliel said there used to be a custom they would give one lot of Peah for all the olives in one direction of the city for that direction, and all in another for that one. And they also used to have the thing custom with the carobs as well. If they could see each other, then even if there's fences and so on, you would just give one lot of Peah for the lot. Now Rabbi Sadak said the name of Rabbi Gamliel, even one lot of carobs for the whole town, they used to, even if they don't see each other, you'd just give one lot of carobs. Now, things which make a division with the seeds, we spoke about kotesh, the interlocking branches. Now, what's the expression kotesh? Is it like a pounder, or does it mean like hitting? It's the branches onto the other. Does it mean the branches hit each other, or does it mean the branches sort of weaken the fence? Maybe that's what it is. So the answer is the expression of kotesh. It means that they're sort of interlocking al gabe ageda, that their branches are hitting each other. They're not the actual fence, but they're hitting each other. Now Ramana said there are times where you might have a second tree within 4 amas of the first tree, and the branches are not helping. If it's within 4 amas, and there are times where it doesn't join. It was within 10 tefachim. It depends how they are, how they're made, where the branches are. It could be this is a different opinion, actually. It could be if they're planted 10 trees to a base saw within an area of 2,500 square amas, and there's more than 4 amas gap. In the time ago, we spoke about, do the trees have a cylindrical area around them, a circular area of 2,500 amas for over the 10 trees, or do we draw squares around all the trees? Now, what do we get from this? How did the Tanai, what's the din of Seah Kotesh? How do we understand it? So on the one hand, we said it's got to be within 4 amas. Well, that means the tree should be within 4 amas of a fence, and also it should be within 10 tvachim. That means between the branches as well. Even if the branches that are not interlocking shouldn't be more than 10 tvachim away. And also if providing the trees are in their state of 10 trees for a base saw as well. Now, Haruvin, we said you divide it by the city. Now, how do you decide the directions of the city? Well, you look at the city. How do you look at the trees? We look at the city. And from the directions of the city, you can work out the directions. Whereas Rabun said they used to have 4 olive presses scattered on the 4 sides of the city, and they would give, according to each side, would have its own press. If you have 3 rows of trees, then let's say the outer trees in the first row, they see the middle trees, and the middle trees see the outer trees on both sides. So for the middle ones can see the outer ones on their side, and the middle ones can see the outer ones on their side, but you can't separate Peah from the 2 outer ones for the 2 outer ones because they are far away, they don't see each other. Turning to halacha daled, if you sow one type, you might have 2 areas, 2 gronos. You're going to divide everything into 2 big bundles. You can give 1 Peah for the lot. That's with 1 min, right? 1 type of species. If, however, you're sowing 2 species, even though you're going to store it all together, you still have to give 2 lots of Peah. If you sow your field 2 lots of wheat, you made 1 big granary, you give 1 lot of Peah. 2 granaries, 2 areas, then you have to give 2 Peahs. Then we have a story where Rav Shimon, he had 2 types of wheat. He came to Gamliel, and they went to the Dishkas Agazis. They asked the question, Nachem Alabla, I have a tradition, that they had a tradition from the Nevi'im, that if you sow your field 2 types of wheat, so the white wheat and the brown wheat, 1 goren is 1 Peah, 2 gorens, 2 storehouses is 2 Peahs. Okay? Sowing your field 2 types of wheat. Now, what happens if you cut half, let's say, the white wheat, and half the brown wheat, and your intention is to make it in one thing together, then you change your mind, and you ended up making it into 2. So what the din is, you can't start separating Peah from, let's say, the white one for the brown one, not in the first half, and not in the second half. Because the thought when you finish the cutting decides the whole crop. At the end of the cutting, you wanted to divide it into two, you have to separate peah from each area separately. If you cut half the white wheat and half the brown wheat with the intention to make it two, and then you change your mind and make it one, then you can separate from the brown wheat at the end on the white wheat at the end, or from the brown wheat at the beginning on the white wheat from the beginning, because at the end you decided to make it all one, therefore one lot of harvest. Whatever happens, you can separate from the brown wheat at the beginning for the brown wheat for the end, for the first for the second, because that is all one species. Okay. Also, the idea of separating from the first half is when you end up, let's say, you ended up cutting the whole field. The whole field you've decided, but that's when we're talking about where you ended up finishing it. If you haven't yet finished your whole field, then you can't give peah from the first half that you've already been cut, even on the brown wheat at the end and the brown wheat at the beginning, because there's still some left beside. If something is still left to cut, then that you should leave peah from what is left to cut, not from what's been cut already. If you cut half the white stuff and half the brown stuff with the intention to make it one goren, and you changed your mind and you made it into two, then you've got to separate peah from the, let's say, the white stuff, what's remaining on the white stuff that's been cut, and the brown stuff, which is there as well, that is potter from peah. Why? Because the chiyuv of peah is to separate it from that which is connected. So in the beginning, when you cut, let's say, the brown, then the chiyuv of peah went to the white, which was still connected. Later on, you decide to make it into two, then the white is another type of min, and you can't separate from that for the brown. And now you can't separate the peah for the brown from that which is connected. Basically, the chiyuv of peah has disappeared from that amount. We bring a story where Rav Shimon cut two types of wheat in one field, and they had a tradition. Now, if halacha comes to you and you don't know about it, don't start saying, oh, there's a mistake, because many halachas were said to Moshe Sinai, and they're all brought in the Mishnah, or the source is halacha Moshe Sinai, even though you don't know it. And they bring a proof for this, because the two types of wheat, had Nachum not come and told us, would we have known it? We would have thought the Chachamim made up the halacha, whatever it is. So here we learn that halachas are actually halacha Moshe Sinai. And they bring psukim about it. Ruby Tarasi, like my Torah is like a stranger. Do you think the Rov of the Torah was written? But it's like many halachas which are darshan from Ksav, from things which are darshan from the mouth, from halacha Moshe Sinai, right? And chaviv in the words of which are darshan from the peah, are chaviv from the things which are darshan from Tosh B'Chsav. And they also quote Echtab Ruby Tarasi. These are techachas in Vayikra. But are they not like a stranger? People didn't take Musa. And okay. Rav Chagai said the name of Shmuel Bar Nachman. He says things are said b'peh and things are said b'ksav. We don't know which one is more chaviv, but the fact that it says Peah Chazarah Daf, that tells me that Dvarim sheb'peh are more chaviv. We have Machlekes Rav Yochanan and Rav Shimon. One says that if you've learnt what's in your mouth and you've kept what's written, I'll do a covenant, and if not, I won't do a covenant. And the other one said, Remes to two Torahs, if you kept what's in your mouth and you kept what's Mashur B'Chsav, then you'll get reward, and if not, you will not get a reward. From Shulman Levi, we said there are various psukim here. It says the luchos, right, which is luchos avanim, ksuvim be'etzva lekim, right? Various extra words, aleim, kol, kachol, dvarim, hadvarim, various words there. It tells me all these things. Even what Talmud will be Daesh in the future was all said to Moshe Sinai, and also it says in Koheles the things, look, you think this is new, and the friend says, no, this is not new, this was said a long time ago. Rav Zira said you can't start learning Davar B'Tach Davar not from Halachos Moshe Sinai, not from Agadas, not from Tosafos, only from the Talmud, and Chanafta ben Shol comes along and says the din of peah with two species of wheat is the same with two species of barley as well. And then the Gemara says, Rabbi Zeira said they had this halacha, they forgot it, that the din is the same, two species of wheat is like two species of barley. But we've learned that when it comes to the moist onions that you want to sell in the market, and then the dry ones, and you keep them for the goren, and you can separate peah on their own, on two separate, you made them into two lots. They're like two types of wheat, two types of granos, each one has got its own chiyuv peah. Now, are you going to tell me, now, does that make it two? The fact that you're going to sell those in a market and those are going to go in a goren? So, was that halacha that was forgotten with onions? Do you think that if that was the din that was forgotten, you want to think that was forgotten with onions? We don't want to say that. We don't have an answer to that question. Rav Hanania said in the name of Shmuel, you can't learn from what a chacham was paskin in a specific case. But everyone agrees you can't learn from a meister, from a story. Rav Mona said that's all very well. It's where the halacha is not made, it's not logical. But if it's logical, the halacha is coming from that story, then we can learn the halacha based on that. And then the other Rav Hanania said, no, whether it's logical or not, you can't. That's where it's a matter where there's an argument. But if there's no argument, then whether it's logical or not, then you can learn from there halacha l'maisa. A field that's been cut by goyim or listim or the insects, whatever, the wind has broken it down, or an animal is potter from peah. If you cut half and then listim cut half, it's potter, because the chiyuv of katzir was in what was left cut, what was left connected to the ground, which the listim did the cutting. If the listim cut half and then you cut half, you give peah for what you cut, but not for the first half. If you cut half and you sold half, the buyer has to give peah for the whole field, also for the bits that you cut to the beginning. If you cut half and then you makdish half, the person who redeems it from hegdish, he gives peah for the whole amount. Now this is all very well, that if goyim cut it, it's part of from peah, that's where they did it for themselves. If they cut it for you, it's chayav a peah. We've also learned you can't start hiring workers to start cutting a field of Yisrael because they're not boki in they don't get polim who are goyim, because they're not boki in the laws of leket shikha peah. We're worried they're going to make a mistake, and that's if they're cutting for you. Now that's all very well where they listim, let's say, the din of listim is they cut it to destroy it. So it's part of from peah. But if they cut it not to destroy it, but take for themselves, then you are chayav per peah. And Rav Shimi said, even if you're going to tell me they cut it not to destroy it, it's still part of from peah, because you didn't do it, so it's part of from peah. Right? The peah is given b'mechuber lekarka. The chiyuv peah is on who has it in his domain. But the listim never really acquired it while it was connected to the ground. They don't have land. Therefore it's stolen. And you can't really steal it. So the times comes out when the chiyuv peah came about, it wasn't in the owners of the listim, and therefore it's potter. When they cut it, it's potter from peah. If you cut half and listim cut half, it's potter. Now the reason of you cutting half and listim cutting half is potter, because remember, usually when you cut a field, you're the one who has to be mafresh for the comma, right, on the rest which is connected to the ground. And whoever you can be mafresh from a comma on the kotzir, but you can't be mafresh from kotzir, that which has been cut, not on that which has been cut, and not that which is still standing. Okay. Now, really, you shouldn't be separating peah from kotzir, but there are times where you can separate peah from kotzir. What's the case if you ended up cutting the whole thing? And then you left amounts of peah, you separated from peah, then you cut what you've left. In these situations, once you've cut the first stalk of what you've left, you've cancelled the peah from that which has been connected, and peah goes back to the omrin, which is the amount that was cut to begin with. Right? The new obligation comes back on that which has already been cut. So in such a case, you're being mafresh from the kotzir for the cover. Now, not only if you ended up finishing the field, and let's say you left just 1 in 60, but even if you cut, let's say, a small part of the field, and you said, right, now on, I'm leaving peah now, I'm leaving peah for the rest, okay? And after that, you started cutting what you've left. So here as well, once you cut the first shibayles, the peah name has gone away, and peah goes back to the omrin, and therefore you're ending up being mafresh from a kotzir of a comma, okay? All right. If you ended up, if you cut, let's say you cut half and you sell half. So one who sells, let's say he's a poor person, does he get the peah? But the buyer is being mafresh, he's matir the omrin of the seller. So we bring a proof. Rabbi Yehuda said, the worker gets the field from balabais in order, let's say, gets his wage, a third, a half, a quarter, right? But if he tells the balasoder, if the owner of the field just says, look, a third of what you cut will be yours, he can take leket shikha peah. Okay? Now, whereas the first case, he says a worker can't take leket shikha peah. Now, what's the difference? Because when the difference is like this, when the balabais says, when after you cut a third, it will be yours, then he doesn't get the produce while it's connected to the ground. Do you understand? It's only given to him after the cutting. So leket shikha peah, achal on the owner of the field, not on the worker. Therefore, the worker can take the matnas in for himself. In the case where the worker acquires the right in the produce while it's connected to the ground, he is the owner of the field, and therefore chiv leket shricha peah goes on him, and he's not allowed to take them. And Rabbi Bachia said, that's all very well that a worker can take peah when he's not shutuf in the field. That tells me that the seller who cuts half and sells half, can take the peah which the purchaser is buying of him, even though it's matir the omrin in his domain, because now he has no chelik in the field, and therefore the worker can be zeichan peah, even though the peah is matir the omrin in his domain. But then the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi comes along and says, no. If the worker is cutting the field, then the field has not got a chiv in his domain, right? It was never his, and therefore he didn't have to separate peah for it, and the chiv peah is on the owner of the field, so the worker can take the peah. But here, in this case, the field of the seller is chayav peah when it is in his domain. So even though he goes and sells half and gives the chiv hafrosha to the purchaser, but that peah is considered the peah of the seller, and therefore he's not allowed to take it. And the Gemara says, look, if it was a case where, let's say, you cut half and you sell of what you've cut, and then you separate peah from the other half, then in this situation I'd prove that a purchaser is allowed to take leket shricha peah of the field. That I would have understood. Because then it's like the Mishnah, the produce wasn't in his bailus when it was connected to the ground, so just like a worker can take the peah even though he's matir the omrim in his domain, a purchaser can also be zeichan peah even though he's matir the tzvua. But our question was when the moicha cut half and he sold half, and the question is, can the moicha get the peah of that second half? There's no right from the Mishnah to allow that, because at the time when the Sadeh had a chiyuv peah, he was considered the Baal HaSadeh. Okay? If, however, the purchaser who buys the second half of the field, if he's poor, can he get the peah which is matir the omrin of the seller or not? It's Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, which we brought, about a poor person who acquires produce. Is he chayav to give Masa Ani? Rabbi held he's allowed to be Zeicha Masa Ani of the produce itself, because the Chiv Masa Ani was already chal in the seller's domain, and he's not considered of the Lekeach. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi held, Misada Din, the Lekeach can do it, but still it's forbidden. It looks like they're buying tevel to be masik the Masa Ani for themselves. Okay. If you cut half and you're makdish half, when you redeem it from the gizba, then you're giving peah for the whole amount. So Rabbi Pinchas asked, if you have produce that's brought into Eretz Yisrael, let's say on a boat, which came from abroad on a boat, and is being cut in Israel, that's one way of learning, the different ways of learning that piece. Was the din, has it have a chiv peah or not? Don't tell me, well, Hegdish is patur, and stuff from abroad is patur. Well, Hegdish, which was redeemed before cutting, so also it was in the domain of someone else. Time when it's cutting, it was b'shus hediot, therefore it's chayav peah. So chutz la'aretz as well, that was cut in Eretz Yisrael, maybe it's chayav peah. So we bring kasir atzechem, but not kasir chutz la'aretz, so there's no chayav peah. If a gizbar cuts half of that half which was hegdish, and he doesn't cut the whole field, and then someone else goes and redeems it, then you mafresh peah from that which is cut on the kotzi which is magdish was cut on the first half of the field, and that which was cut through the gizbar, which was hegdish, is already going to be exempt, because the katsir hegdish, anything cut by the gizbar, is part of from peah.